This edition of MacVoices is supported by you, our viewers and listeners, through our new Patreon campaign. If you get value from MacVoices, please consider helping support the show by visiting patreon.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we have a topic that a lot of people have been talking about recently. In fact, that's why I wanted to do this, because I listened to our two guests talk on two different podcasts about our topic, and I kept yelling at the radio or the iPad or the iPhone or whatever I happen to be listening on about things, because I think they've missed at least one key point. So I want to find out if I'm right or if they disagree with me. The topic is Apple in education. We have, and I guess as we recorded this in about 2 weeks or so, give or take, Apple is going to do an education event in Chicago, and we're all waiting to see what that means. But in the meantime, we're going to talk Apple and education with Kelly Guimont. Kelly, welcome. It's good to see you.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me on the show, Chuck.
Hey, it's always fun. It's been too long.
Yeah.
And Mr. Jeff Gamet of the Mac Observer. Jeff, it's been way too long for you, but I'm delighted you're here.
Yeah. I'm really happy too. Chuck, it's been way too long. I've been missing you. Yeah,
well, I've been missing you too. And I know that you've just been busy. I mean, a man of your stature and in the tech industry is just, I'm delighted that you can make time for us.
Well, I'm delighted when you make time for me.
Well, you're always welcome.
Aw.
So, Jeff, I heard you on Daily Observations. Kelly, I heard you on iChart Radio. Mm-hmm. And there were different aspects of this that I think need to be talked about. And so I'm going to kind of let you two do policy statements almost to start with, as to where you think Apple is in the education market, how you feel about it, just to give us a baseline, because I know some of what you've said, but the listeners may not. So Kelly, how about if we start with you? Are you happy with the way Apple is addressing the education market?
Currently, no. I think that they could be doing more than they're doing, and part of the reason I think that is because I've seen some what look to be more overt gestures from other companies to get into the education market and to be a little bit more accommodating for some of the things in education that are going to matter. Like, are we going to need to replace everything every 2 years, every 5 years? How much life are we going to get out of this actual technology? What kind of pricing can we get on this, that's going to make it something competitive enough that school budgets are going to be okay with approving something, some new tool. And I think that there's a little bit of regularity that sometimes is missing. And I know Apple's not supposed to release anything until it's done, but when they release things on a schedule, nobody likes it. And when they don't release things on a schedule, nobody likes it. And I don't know how to reconcile those things. So I feel like they could be doing more than they are doing, but I do think that there's a certain amount of stuff coming imminently with this event in Chicago that hopefully will illuminate us a little bit more on what their longer term strategy is. We've heard about some stuff. We know some other things that are coming. And part of the reason I'm extra interested in what happens on the educational side is because one of the things you get with education is a large organization and having to deploy and manage and maintain hardware and software for a large organization. And a lot of the stuff that they do for education, they could also be offering for enterprise customers as well. And I feel like there's a whole lot of opportunity there that Apple themselves is missing out on. A lot of what's happening there is people jumping in and building the bridge themselves instead of having Apple do it for them.
Okay, good. A couple things I'm not sure I agree with. A couple things I definitely agree with. Jeff, what do you think?
I'm disappointed with Apple's position in education today. And they can please me at any time. It's all on them. So this is in Apple's court right now. I think Apple squandered away their lead in the education market, and they handed that over to Microsoft. And then Microsoft has followed in Apple's footsteps and squandered that and handed that over to Google. And so now Apple is in a position where they have to figure out how to compete with a company that's offering something that no one else really seems to be doing right now, which is really low-cost hardware and free services. And that's a hard combination for education to pass up. I mean, schools are already underfunded in many areas, and every penny counts. So they just can't afford to buy into Apple's ecosystem today. And I know I'm making a blanket statement. There are schools around and school systems that are doing very well with Apple's products. But just generally speaking, I feel like Apple has lost their place in the education space. So like Kelly, I am looking forward to seeing what happens at this media event in Chicago at, I just forgot the name of the school. Something
Lane Tech College Prep High School?
That sounds right. Lane Tech.
Very much like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a lot of words.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me know when you want to know what I think Apple's going to do at that event, and I will just fill your brain.
Okay. Well, that's good. We'll do that later in the show. I don't think there's much question that Apple has. It seems like they have lost their focus on education, or are just not focused on education. And I can't argue with that. I guess one of the first questions, and Jeff, I want to come back to one point that you did later, but one of the first questions is, does Apple need to be focused on education? And the reason I ask this is because there was a time that it was absolutely imperative that Apple be focused on business, and bring, get Apple devices in on the desks of major U.S. corporations. And then we had the whole bring your own device thing. Sometimes it was an official policy. Sometimes they came in through the back door, the side door, over weekends, at night, and end up on desks. And that's kind of what I'm wondering now, because I'm quick to say that I'm either the best or the worst person to examine Apple in education, because I've got no kids. I've got no kids in my life, and I have limited interaction with the educational system. But I do have friends that are teachers. My girlfriend's a teacher. And so I hear about the kids having iPhones and iPads. Now, that depends on your district. I completely understand that. But I hear more and more about kids bringing stuff to school themselves as opposed to being handed something. And again, depending on your district, but it strikes me, is it worth Apple really trying to focus on the education market when iPhones and iPads are making their way into the schools with the kids? And half the time, I think the kids probably know more about how to use them than the teachers do.
Well, okay, so Apple focusing on iPhone is really smart, because that puts Apple in everyone's pocket all the time. And clearly, what Apple has done in that space has been pretty effective, because, and granted, I know we're in an Apple specific community right now, but when you look around, you see a ton of iPhones everywhere, and you see a lot of kids with iPhones. So, I mean, it's smart that Apple is focusing on that, but there's more than just the whole consumer side of Apple in schools because there's an iPhone in your pocket. Excuse me. There's also the aspect of what are the tools that the kids are using every single day, and then when you extrapolate that out, wow, then you have the whole thing of what about all of the data and other information that the kids are generating, and how is that being protected, and how is that being used?
Thank you. You've fallen into my trap.
Oh, foiled by Chuck again.
Because that's the thing that I've not heard. Neither one of you have mentioned this, nor have I heard anybody else in discussions of Apple in technology, or in education, excuse me. Google is one of those companies. It's one of a couple companies that make no bones about the fact that you are their product. Mm-hmm. And here we have Google giving away hardware, giving away services, giving away everything, and nobody's questioning this.
So you will give away your data.
You will give, and you'll give away your child's privacy. And if you walked into any school board meeting, especially right now in the environment in the educational world, and said, you know what, your kids are being potentially, I'm not ready to go and say spied on, but your kids are being monitored. Your kids' data is being monitored. Every time they open a Chromebook, guess what? The camera is active. Guess what? They know exactly where it is, whether it's at a local restaurant or at home or wherever kids gather.
Right.
All that information is right there. And why is nobody asking this question and touting this as an Apple advantage when it comes to privacy?
I think a big piece of that is that not a lot of people are that far down that road. And the reason I think that is because I see the same sort of thing in home automation. Like, I've been trying to buy neat stuff that I can Internet of Thing my house with, or neat stuff that I can home automate with. And it's hard for me to find a clear security policy on some of this stuff. It's hard for me to find, what are you doing with the data about when I turn my lights on and off every day? And can I change the default password on this piece of hardware that you want me to hang off my network? Like, what kind of security measures am I going to have to take as a result of the fact that you, hardware manufacturer, aren't taking any of those, any sort of precaution, and aren't doing anything to make it so that I can mitigate some sort of issue on my own network? And not a lot of people are asking those questions. And I think it's partly because we haven't seen it yet. So we haven't seen that a bunch of fifth graders all in one school district in one classroom or something, suddenly have all of their information as part of a network of Twitter bots, or part of the information on Facebook that where something is happening, or they don't all suddenly start receiving MasterCard invitations in the mail. Like, we haven't seen it go wrong yet. And so nobody thinks of it as a problem, but it would give me a lot of concern. And I think I think the other part of it is that a lot of people are willing to overlook that and willing to not have to answer that question because Google gave us hardware for nothing or next to nothing. And we need it to be something so that the kids are used to using a computer and that it's not a big deal to have technology in your life and all that kind of stuff. And it's in Google's best interest to make sure, just like it was in Apple's best interest back in the day, if you are a kid who went all through school only using Apple hardware, then it makes it really easy to, as an adult, go use Apple hardware. And they want Google to, and Google wants to train people, like, your stuff doesn't live on your hard drive, it lives in the cloud, and you just go get at it from whatever device you're on right now. And the reason that's really important is because we want all of your data, because we have all of these machines that are doing all of this machine learning that's eventually going to turn on you. Let's talk about robot uprising for a minute. This is how it's going to start. And it's going to be because everybody went, oh, but it's just homework. What does it matter? Because now at least we've got technology for our students, and our students need technology. So
but
it concerns me a lot, but I don't have a lot to say about that piece of the conversation because I'm not as familiar with exactly what Google is doing in all those schools. And I don't have a whole bunch of insight myself personally into what those agreements look like. So I can't say, oh, well, this is what they're doing, but I know enough about what Google does to know that there's a secondary thing there, and it's not Google charging into schools and showering Chromebooks upon them in order to make the world better so that our workforce is better prepared and able to wield technology in a useful fashion. I know that's not what they're doing. If you are not paying, you are not the customer. And I don't know how many times I have to repeat that before people start listening.
All the times.
Yeah.
But and then 5 more after that for the people in the back. So I just... like, that's the part that I find really frustrating because nobody asks that kind of stuff. Like, what are you doing if I push that login with Facebook button? What exactly does it mean if I say, yeah, just log in using my Twitter account? What does it mean what exactly does it mean when I buy this thing that has this little plastic thing that I'm supposed to plug an Ethernet cable into that hangs out on my network and I can't change the password to? What does that actually mean? It means that I can put bars on all the other doors, and but I have this open window over here, and I just have to hope nobody finds it.
Right.
And security through obscurity is a bad model.
Well, and Kelly, yeah, I'm with you. I don't know all the policies and programs, but again, Google. I mean, that's what they do, and listen, I admit to being a bit of a hypocrite because I'm a Gmail user. I don't use a lot of the other Google services, but Gmail, because of its convenience, I admit it. I know that it's being monitored because I see things that come through that certainly make me believe that somebody's watching what I'm doing, and and I don't mean somebody, but the algorithms are watching me and then feeding
the
me
man
things.
is watching you, Chuck. The man.
Well, yeah, and it fascinates me that and by the way, to one thing that you said, anybody that believes that their kids are doing only the homework on this tech are sadly mistaken. Come on now. I mean, I'm not suggesting that they're plotting the overthrow of the free world, but they're out exploring other websites and other things that maybe their parents don't know about or might have a little bit of hesitancy. That's all part of giving kids, access to a library or to any technology. They're going to push its boundaries. They're going to go places that maybe it wasn't intended. And that's where I start to have a little bit of concern here because, pardon me. So now Google has all this information about where kids are going, what they are looking at. How can they use that? I'm not smart enough to know. But at the end of the day, they've got it.
Google does have policies in place related to the data that kids are using in school. So that's not supposed to be accessed in the same way that just the general population's data is being accessed. It's supposed to be more protected. It's supposed to be more private, more anonymous. But that said, like you pointed out earlier, if you aren't paying, you're the product. So what level of access is Google really taking into that information? Because ultimately, it's the information that counts for Google. It's not if you're spending $150 or $200 for Chromebooks en masse from Google or some other company. It's about the data.
So. Yeah. If we're going to talk about the data, like if I'm a senior in high school this year and I use a Chromebook at school and I turn it in at the end of the year, what happens to that data? Is there a way once I am a college user or if I go sign up for a Gmail account, does it have any relationship to all that stuff I did previously? Because that's a thing that I start to wonder when we hear about how Facebook has profiles on people that get invited. Facebook has profiles because everybody says, yeah, it's okay on my phone to upload all my contacts. LinkedIn has profiles based on what it can find out from all of the people that have LinkedIn that invited you to LinkedIn, even though you don't use that email address for LinkedIn, like LinkedIn still knows a bunch about you. And what happens with all that information? Like we've had the internet for long enough that a lot of people could have a really long tail when it comes to stuff like this. And I feel like if Apple were doing it, it would be one thing. But if Google is doing it, I'm a lot less comfortable with Google being who's being able to zero all of that in and go, hey, Kelly, here's email from your email address in 1993, which never had anything to do with Google, but we have your email or, whatever it was. And I'm wondering what kind of impact that's going to have later on when, like, if I have a data trail in some fashion for most of my life and Google's the only one that has access to it.
I agree, and I admit I don't know enough about this part. But does a student, when they sign up, do they get a Google ID or do they get a Gmail account?
Yes. So you get a Gmail account, you get a Google ID, but it can be associated with the school's domain. So the schools can essentially issue those Google IDs for the students.
Okay.
And I think there's a way that can roll over to your own Google account later on. Like you go all through school and you graduate, and I think they can roll that school assigned name or account over to you when you leave. But I mean, in this respect, it's actually cool what Google's doing from a technology standpoint, because they've made it very easy for schools to manage students' names and domain and IDs. So there's not really any hoops that students or parents or the AT staff have to go through. And you get into school, and they can just assign you your ID through the school's own domain.
And that's fine. I mean, we all know there are upsides and downsides to this stuff. I mean, because of Gmail, I can go back years and years and years and years and search for emails. And while there are times that's a good thing, it may not be a good thing, depending. But I have to wonder what the legality is. So if you quote unquote capture a child at 12, and then what happens to the access to all that history that you've developed on them when they hit 18 or 21 or whatever the age of majority is in your jurisdiction or your country or whatever. And I mean, there are a lot of questions here, and I don't hear anybody asking them. And again, and you can absolutely legitimately ask the same questions of Apple or Microsoft, no question about it. It's just that to a much lesser degree, those companies don't use, to your point, you as the product. And that it maybe people aren't just paying attention. Maybe, Kelly, you're right. Maybe we just have to have, that crisis moment where everybody says, "Oh no."
Well, and I think we've come close a few times. Like, I think it was Target that was like profiling people and started sending like coupons for prenatal vitamins to people based on what they were buying at the store or something. Right. Different things like that. And so I feel like there's at least a vague awareness out there that these sort of profiles exist, because I've read articles about like what kind of stuff LinkedIn knows about you, even if you don't have a LinkedIn account. The Facebook profile stuff. Like, I'm not saying that stuff to scare people. Those are things that actually exist. I've read more than one article in more than one place about them. Just in talking about, they sort of have these placeholder profiles of stuff so that if you do ever sign up, like all of that information is there for you, and they're sort of spinning it as being really convenient for a user. But that's not the point of Facebook. That's not the point of Google. That's not what those companies are in it for. They're in it for daily active users. They're in it for being able to mine that data and generate demographic information they can sell to other companies. And those companies can then, use to do whatever other sort of advertising or marketing that they want to do. So I sort of find it frustrating in that I feel like we've tiptoed up to this and looked over into the abyss of what this problem is and how we can solve it. And I don't know that we've quite made it to that point yet. And I don't think we're going to until something goes wrong. And then people start going, but that could have been my kid or my nephew or my grandchild or whatever small person it is in your life. And like, what if that happened in my family? And I don't think we should wait until it happens to somebody in order to fix it. Like, I feel like this is a thing that we should all kind of be able to get on board with. Like, it's probably not a good idea for this kind of stuff to be mined, the way everything else tends to be mined. But it is going to be one of those things. Like, if when I graduate from high school and I have all of this data associated with me and all I have to do is check the box that's like, don't associate it with my high school anymore, because what I want to do is, I want to have my own Gmail address now that's not associated with my school account anymore. And I check that box. Well, now not only am I a Gmail user, but I've been a Gmail user for all these years because I have all this email from all the kids in my classes or whatever. And, it's the same reason Apple, like I said before, it's the same reason Apple needed to be in the market initially, because, once you get people there, then inertia sometimes can be a pretty powerful thing.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of research.
I knew you would.
Because we have technology.
Yes.
So I have some answers for you now.
Hooray.
Okay, so here's the deal. I don't have a clear-cut answer for this yet. Exactly what level of access Google really has into all of your data as a student when you're enrolled in the Google Education Suite thing, which is what schools are using. But what happens when you leave the school, your account will die. And so it depends on how long the school wants to keep that account active after you leave. So it could be immediately, it could be 6 months, something like that.
Oh, okay.
You can export all of your stuff from your school account and then import it into your own separate Google account.
Bingo.
So what it looks like to me is that all of that stuff, when you're in school, it's supposed to be pretty well protected and just private. Mm-hmm. Once you export it and add it into your own Google account outside of school, well, now it's subject to all the same accessibility that Google has to anything else that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that, I mean, because I would do that. I wouldn't want to lose.
Yeah, you have your email, you have your calendars,
well, yeah,
all that stuff.
I've got all my contacts already, or all the email addresses and everything already there.
What about all the reports you want to repurpose for next year? Yeah,
absolutely. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can just go on and on and on. Who would just walk away from all that? I mean, we all did because we didn't have the tech. But I would love to. I think it'd be at the very least kind of amusing to go back and see the reports that I wrote on whatever I wrote reports on in junior high and high school, and what was important to me. And could I have taken that stuff and used it in college, in my first couple of years of college? Who knows? It might have been a good basis. But that's an interesting way to do it. And Kelly, I'm not quite to your point. I'm not quite as alarmist where I think something is going to have to happen, and we all can look at the news and know what kind of things we're talking about. But I think whichever one of you said it, that okay, all of a sudden everybody gets an application for a credit card from a particular bank. A Google bank, perhaps. It's like, okay, now we know what they've been doing. But there's also, but Jeff, I'm also in the research. Okay, so the information is not associated with you, Jeff Gamet, maybe not even with your school. But is there any indication of how, as a group? I mean, okay, do you think Google has access to this is what seventh graders are doing? These are the websites that seventh graders are migrating to?
With the limited research that I've done while Kelly was talking, I don't know. But it seems to me there's a truthiness to it that Google has some level of access to information, even if it's at a larger aggregate scale where it's all anonymized. I'm imagining Google has some sort of information about what sort of data people are generating and how it's being used in the schools.
Well, Jeff, as a favor to you, I would be more than happy to continue talking so you can dig further into this.
You are the sweetest ever.
So, part of it for me, I think, is that even now, I don't know that we've necessarily reached the point with data and cloud services that I always called the microwave point. When in the days before the microwave, there wasn't one. And then when you got one or your neighbor got one or, someone in your neighborhood got a microwave and it was an event and it was a thing and it was a big deal. And what can you put in it? And it was like a special event kind of a thing because it was this new technology that was going to do everything for you and so much faster and so much easier. And, at first it was a big deal and it got to be less of a big deal. And to people, probably to anybody born in my lifetime, it's not a deal at all. It's a thing that lives in the kitchen. We have a dishwasher, we have a refrigerator, we have a stove, we have a microwave. Those are standard kitchen items. Nobody cares. It's not special. It's not an event. It doesn't matter. So I don't feel like everybody has at least a vague idea how it works and what to do about it. Everybody knows you don't leave a spoon in your coffee when you put it in the microwave, like a metal spoon. You don't wrap stuff in tin foil before you put it in the microwave. You don't turn it on with the door open, like basic safety stuff that everybody sort of knows. Don't turn the oven on high and leave the kitchen towel on the burner. Like easy stuff. We don't have that level of awareness and that level of familiarity with cloud services yet. We haven't reached the point where the magic has gone away of it. And so there's still sync problems. There's still like Wi-Fi issues occasionally, that can cause people all of a sudden, like half my report disappeared because an airplane flew in front of a sunspot and my Wi-Fi glitched. And now 2 pages of my report are gone. So there's things that I don't think we're quite there yet. So there's not a base level of understanding and a base level of awareness that make it possible for people to play that out and then stop and go, but what happens to all that data? How much does Google know about what my kids are doing on their computers? How does all of that work? So I think the reason that it's going to become an issue is because it's going to happen to somebody. And that's what's going to force a bunch of other people to have this conversation, because just like we're seeing right now with Facebook, not everybody was aware that this was the kind of stuff that they were entitled to because nobody read it. Everybody clicked OK, whatever. People who had it taken without their permission, didn't realize that was the thing that was happening. There's a whole bunch of stuff that kind of goes into some of this data breach stuff that is very different from, oh, hey, my Diners Club mailed me a new credit card and now I'm wondering, I wonder what happened. Or, I think everybody at some point who uses Apple Pay has looked at their phone one day and went, why did my card get revoked? And it turns out there was data breach. I have to get a new number from somebody. It's very common. We've all seen that, but there's other sorts of data breaches. Everybody's social security number is out there in the world now, I feel like there's been enough of this stuff that people should be a little bit more invested in. But what happens to my data? What are you going to do with it? If I download this app and I install it and I do whatever it is that this app is supposed to do, what are you doing with the data that comes from that? Do you need my email address? Am I supposed to give you access to all of the contacts in my phone? Maybe Jeff's okay with giving his contacts to whoever that is, but if I'm one of Jeff's contacts, and maybe I'm not okay with it. And where do those lines get drawn? And there's a whole bunch of this that just simply hasn't been addressed. And part of it is because most stuff didn't have this capability until very, very recently to even do anything with any of that information, let alone do a bad thing with any of that information.
And we need to make all of us more aware of it. I just opened a program that I opened it on another Mac. That's because I bought the program, I opened it, and I had something specific in mind, and I needed to get that specific thing done with that program. Mm-hmm. And it opens up for the first time and says, hi, welcome, and then, it wants access to my contacts. Now, this is a program that has nothing to do with communicating with anyone else. And I'm not going to call the program or the company out, but it gave me pause. But you know what? I needed to get done what I needed to get done on that machine with that piece of software at that moment. So I clicked OK. And I've kind of bothered me ever since because, OK, I just gave it access to my contacts.
Well, it should. I'm glad it does.
You mean bother me?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, because it's a thing that you stopped, that you actually, I know you had to get it done, but at least you stopped and thought about it and it's still bothering you. So it's worth sending them an email. If everybody that was trying to use it was like, what does this image editor have to do with all of my email addresses? Yeah. I'm making stuff up.
No, but you're not far off, Kelly.
If that's the thing that I'm doing, or this calculator, I have a calculator. Why does a calculator need access to my contacts? Well, it doesn't. So, I've had stuff do that. And usually what I end up doing is asking them. I will write in. I will use the support form or whatever and go, why do you need this? And very few times have I gotten a response that made me feel good enough about what they were telling me to go, okay, then I'll give it access to whatever data it is that it wants.
Right.
And
Jeff-
that is one thing I will say about Android. I just want to jump in really quick. When you download an application from the Android store, like you would from the iTunes store, one of the things it shows you right on the information panel, besides like what it costs and the reviews and the stars and everything, it says, here's what this application wants access to right there on the store. Now, it's been a while since I looked at the Android store, but the last time I got a look at it, it tells you right on there, this calculator wants access to your contacts and your camera roll and this and that and the other. This image editor wants access to your phone call history. This, like, it tells you right there on the page what it's going to ask you to grant permission for. And I think that that's an important thing that more stuff should do, rather than wait till I'm halfway through the welcome process and then ask me like the application you're talking about.
Yeah. Jeff, have you had a chance to do more research?
Of course.
I knew it. Thank you, Kelly, for talking.
You're welcome, Jeff.
Okay, so here's one thing that actually is really cool about the Google G Suite for Education. You as a parent or guardian get email summaries of how your child is using their email.
Hey,
That's pretty cool.
good.
Okay. Is it?
Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah. Absolutely. If you're a parent and you don't have total control over how your child is using their Chromebook, then knowing who they're emailing, I think, is a really good thing.
I would say at least awareness, because one of the things that this does is teaches you that your school address is not your own. I feel like that's very clear.
And this is a summary. It's not like you're getting
all the emails
details or all the content of all the emails, but you get a summary, so you can see who your kid is interacting with via email. So
on their school address. So
if there's a problem, okay, now you can go talk to your kid. And so I do like that. My feeling is, as a child, you do not have any right to privacy when it comes to your parents or your guardian.
I honestly,
I don't know if I'd go that far myself, but
I
as
don't
far
have
as
kids, so it's really easy for me to say that.
Yeah.
But as far as school, like I feel pretty good about that. Like, because it's the same thing as, people who use their work email address as their personal email address. Like, that's not yours. And you probably signed something that says anything in there is the property of the company. So, if you have your $1 million business idea on company time and you use your company email and it goes out from a company server to your friend and you say, this is the thing that I want to do, like, that's the company's property at this point. Like, people have gone to court over stuff like this. So I feel like school should be the same relationship. Like, your school address is not your address. If you really want to be that kind of troublemaker, you need to be enterprising enough to go sign up for a different email address on your own.
There you go.
All
right.
Okay, go ahead, Jeff. Kelly, make me come back to that.
So here's the other bits of information that I found. Google does not own any of the data that you generate when you're using their G Suite for Education.
Good.
I mean, that's very clear. And they also say that any school or part of a school that decides they're no longer going to use Google's education tools, the tools are in place so they can easily extract all of their data and then move on to something else. So that's good.
Okay.
All right. So then here, this is part of Google's Classroom Help FAQ. Does Google use any of the teacher, students, or school's data outside of Classroom? Your content or data is never used for advertisement purposes. I saw that and I'm like, all right, well, okay, now I'm not comfortable anymore again.
It was any more words than no, and I'm like, okay, I was so close to being yay Google.
Yes. Let's see, which one of Google's counsel wrote that?
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah, all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, hey, at least they're not using it for advertising.
Which is good news, bad news, because they had to specify they're not using it for advertising, which means they're using it for something else. And what is that something else?
Yeah.
So, Chuck, what did you want to say about your data, not your own?
Okay, so this is a personal belief, and I'm sure that there are going to be parents out there that feel free to drop me an email, send me threatening smoke signals, whatever. But
Chuck looks forward to your letters.
Yes.
Not from Gmail.
But I feel like, I mean, the kids are living in a bit of a surveillance state as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And happily, and I'm not asking for anybody to volunteer any information, happily, I didn't really get into any significant trouble as a kid. All right.
Mm-hmm.
But I know kids that did. And most of the time, no, that's not fair. A lot of the time, some benevolent adult basically, slapped them on the hand or across the backside or whatever, corrected them and said, look, you're being stupid. Don't do that. And the kids listened and moved on. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if some of those kids did the very same things in today's world, they're in handcuffs in the back of a squad car being fingerprinted and they have a record. Mm-hmm. And that really bothers me because I don't know that kids they need to have some way to blow off steam. They need to have some way to explore and do things that we maybe did that we either didn't get caught at or it didn't ruin our lives. But
here's the thing, Chuck, you and I, and I'm pretty sure Jeff too, whatever sorts of, we'll call it shenanigans, whatever sorts of shenanigans we were up to when we were in high school, we had to plan them different ways. You knew you couldn't do some of that stuff on the phone. You knew if you were going to write it in a note, you couldn't say.
You had to make a code.
Yeah, it had to be a different thing where you weren't using the same language because we had all these ways to route around not getting caught. And I feel like I don't feel like it should necessarily be arrested. Like, I'm not saying that, but I do feel like if you aren't enterprising enough to not use your school email address to plan a kegger when you're 16, maybe you kind of deserve to get caught. You don't necessarily deserve to go to jail. You need one of these adults that we all ran across in our lives to kind of go, look, this isn't cool. And you know better. And you really need to knock this off. Like those it's easier now to plan that kind of stuff. And it's just as easy for me as a teenager, to go sign up for my own Gmail address or whatever, Yahoo or whatever else. Like, everybody wants to give you an email address these days. It's really easy for me to go get my own and not use my school address to do that. Like, like they always told us in school, for example, that they could search my locker whenever they wanted. Anybody that wanted to, like, if ever there was a teacher and the teacher had a reason, whatever that reason might be, they had a way to go open my locker and take a look around in it, whether I wanted them to or not. And they never did it, but we were always told that they could. Now, the legality of that is probably a matter for another day, but they always said that they could. And so everybody treated their locker like it was the school's property on the school's property. So don't do anything. If you're going to do anything, like, don't leave the stuff in your locker. That's just dumb. Like,
so you're encouraging kids to be smarter about misbehaving, to be thinking.
Yes.
And you are
because we had to be so smart about misbehaving.
And
they have to be smart too. That's only fair.
It's only fair. You're pushing them to an unsecured, out in the wild email address from somebody, Google, Yahoo, whoever.
Well, when you say it that way, it's not quite as cool.
Well,
and we all know it's all happening in Signal or WhatsApp or Telegram or something anyway. Like, you don't need grandma over here telling you what it is you need to do in order not to get caught. Like, it's easy to not get caught. We were able to not get caught before the internet.
Yeah, I know, but I feel like maybe I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I feel like you're encouraging kids to go out into dangerous places because the safe places are being monitored 24/7, 365 with, 3D infrared cameras. And,
the monitoring that I'm talking about when I said, oh, I'm so glad that they do this email report, and I don't think kids should think that they have this absolute right to privacy with their parents. I'm not saying that parents and guardians need to act like a police state and just ransack the bedroom every now and then, go through everything. It's the fact that they know that if they need to, they have a way to go and check up and see what's going on.
Right.
and that the kids understand that there's accountability, and that their parents or their teachers, whoever, have the ability to go and look at this information if they need to.
And I'm absolutely all for accountability. And I get what you're saying, Jeff. I guess I'm arguing just a little bit in the abstract, and I know I'm going to get hate mail for it. But I at least some of these questions need to be asked about, where can kids go to feel safe and feel like that place is their own? I mean, we went through the period of Facebook. Facebook is where all the kids went. And then it got invaded.
And then everybody's mom followed them on Facebook, and now they've all moved to Snapchat or something. I don't know.
And now apparently Snapchat, you're seeing the same problems with Snapchat. I don't know where they're going next. But, it's this constant desire to have a space of their own. And, look, sometimes maybe not so nice things are going to happen in those spaces of their own. But it's
right.
part of growing up.
And I'm not saying there shouldn't be that. And I'm not saying that there should not be that outlet. And I'm not saying that you should go sign up at Fast Eddie's house of emails and get an address from some shady dude to strip mall. I'm not saying that, but
what could possibly go wrong?
Well, let's start with there's a whole bunch of encrypted messaging right here, because iMessage in a group chat is encrypted end to end. And so as far as fundamental safety of making sure that people can't snoop on my information, I'm good, because I've got it right here on, my new phone, or what was my mom's phone last year that's my phone this year because I got her old iPhone or whatever. There's always going to be a way to do that, and an enterprising kid should be able to do that, because if you're using your school email address, like I said, to play in a kegger, you do deserve to get caught, because that's just laziness on your part. Let's be honest, that's just lazy. You can do better. Mischief makers of America, aim higher.
Oh man, we're gonna get Kelly's email address is somehow
Kelly at kager.com.
Yeah. Somehow we got way off topic here, off the topic of Apple and education. I want to get back to that, because Jeff, you said that you have some strong opinions about what's coming, and I definitely want to tap into those before we go.
Okay, so I think that Apple's big announcements at the Lane Tech, is that what we decided it's called, at the high school in Chicago, it's going to be a new education initiative, and it's going to be a platform that's designed to make it much easier for education institutions to use Apple's tools, much in the same way that there's G Suite for education. So I think we're looking at something where Apple's going to make it easy for a school to assign Apple IDs, instead of the crazy process that they have to go through now with all the paperwork and stuff. It'll just be like the domain can manage the IDs. And it'll work much in the way that G Suite for education does. And I think that Apple is going to make it easier to manage iOS devices for multiple users in the education space, not in the general use space. So they already have their system in place where you can have a single iPad that multiple students log in and get only their own stuff. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to see some sort of enhancement to that. But I think the big thing is going to be this new system that makes it much easier to use Apple's tools in school.
Jeff, do you think it's important at this stage because of so much of the cloud? The cloud is so involved in everything. Do you think that having a piece of Apple hardware that is dedicated to education is really critical? Or do you think it's more important to have the services there that maybe could be theoretically accessed by a computer or a Chromebook or a Microsoft Surface or anything else, that it's not as much hardware specific as maybe it used to be?
I think it's the services that are more important. And but with that, it would be really nice if Apple had a special education pricing or product line at a lower price that makes their hardware more affordable for schools. But really, the big thing is if you can have Apple services platform agnostic for education, then that makes Apple's products much more enticing all the way around. And with Apple managing all of the data for an educational institution, we're not going to get to the bottom of the FAQ where I got all excited about everything they're doing and then say, okay, all bets are off because we really don't know what's happening with our data. With Apple, it will be very clear. They will not access the data. They will not use it for anything. And at no point will Apple want to have any direct access to any of that content.
Without telling you. I mean,
right, without telling.
Yeah, we need to leave that option open because, they may need or want to do something with it, and you may be fine with it. That's the thing.
Sure.
It's the questions that we have that I think are the most disturbing to me. And that'd be a really interesting play. If all of a sudden Apple didn't have to try to sell the hardware to the schools, they could let the schools buy the lowest common denominator hardware or the highest, whatever they can afford, but the Apple services are the ones that people are going to use.
Sure. I could see something where it doesn't matter what hardware you're using, it just works. But if you're using Apple's hardware, it just integrates better.
It works a little better somehow. I like the idea of that.
Yeah.
I am very, very interested in this event twice, obviously, because it's an Apple event and I'm an Apple nerd, but also as a volunteer for App Camp for Girls, where we've come up against this kind of hardware management and software management for ages. And since the beginning of camp, as soon as we started trying to create data, generate artwork, put stuff together, all of these things that we are doing are really hard. And we have to sort of improvise ways to do a lot of this for a bunch of different reasons. Part of it is because right now, when we have camp, we have teams of developers that are generally teams of 4, and each team of 4 has 2 MacBook Pros that they are using. Between all 4 of them, 2 iPad Pros that they're using between all of them, and each of them has an iPod Touch that they use throughout the week that they can build their projects to and take home at night and show off. This is what we did at camp today. And managing all of that stuff is a pain. The Apple ID provisioning stuff alone has given greater minds than mine migraines, and I've had my own share of those. And managing the iPads is really new because we only introduced those last year. But managing the iPods has been hard. Managing the laptops has been hard. Being able to scale this stuff, because now we have to have more than one set of equipment because we have more than one camp in the same week. We need to make sure that everything's up on the same operating system. That different people who pick up the iPad are getting the thing that they were working on previously, or being able to restore all of that stuff to 0 instead of the first year of camp, what we ended up doing, which was literally taking all of the iPod Touches and lining them up in a row. And I turned each of them on and I went settings, general, erase all. I mean it. For a dozen of them at a time, and then having to go walk through the thing again, hello, yes, United States, Wi-Fi password, because it's just for somebody who doesn't necessarily know what they're doing and for whom the technology piece is not their focus. If you are a teacher of anything besides a computer class, if you're a math teacher and now suddenly on top of everything else, you have to start managing all these iPads in this cart in the back of your classroom, this stuff needs to be a no-brainer for people who aren't technological people. If I'm a math teacher, my point is teaching you math. My point is not teaching you iPads. If I'm an English teacher, I'm supposed to be teaching you composition and grammar and structure and how to make a persuasive argument in a paper. I'm not supposed to be teaching you how you use the application on your iPad. I mean, teaching you what to write is a very different process from teaching you how to write. And that's the disconnect that I think a lot of people are not necessarily considering. But that being said, I'm really excited to see what Apple ends up doing with this. We've heard some rumors that there's Class Kit or something like that coming. And what I hope is that it is a kit, because we've seen what people can do with Health Kit and we've seen what people can do with AR Kit. and HomeKit and the other kinds of kits that Apple has opened up for developers. And I feel like somewhere out there is somebody who is fluent in Apple development, whether it's macOS development, iOS development, and is also in education, like deeply involved in education in some way, and sees that need and is able to speak that in a way that allows them to build a thing that helps take advantage of some of this stuff, and that some of the tools that come out are only going to make it better and easier. And I'm really excited about that because Google does have a little bit of a head start as far as the number of Chromebooks in classrooms and the number of people using Google services. So I am always excited to watch Apple when it looks like Apple's really going to have to compete. And this is a space where they have to compete. So I'm really, really excited to see what comes out of the education event because I'm currently the hardware administrator for App Camp, and I really want that part of my job to be easier because right now it's really not. And I want it to be better. And we are a very lightweight organization as far as like I have all of these devices to manage for these kids because I don't have to do it for 9 months. I have to do it for a week. And then I have to be able to turn all that stuff over and do it again for the next week for a different camp in a different city. So I really want this stuff to be better, and I want it to be great, and I want it to be something that is trivial so that I'm not the only person that can be responsible for doing it. So I'm very, very excited to see what comes out of this, and I am very much looking forward to it. Like I said, twice, because as an Apple nerd, I'm very curious what they're going to do. And as a person who has been up against this hurdle again and again, I'm really excited to see how they're going to lower it for me.
One of the purposes of this, of doing this discussion, was obviously to address a couple things. I was joking with you all earlier about what I heard you say and what I thought you were missing. But first of all, I wanted to discuss Apple's position in education in anticipation of the event, but also maybe to get people to think a little bit about some of these issues. I don't know that I'm right. I don't know that Kelly's right. I don't know that Jeff's right. I don't know that any of us are right. But they are questions that need to be thought about by educators, by parents, and by the kids themselves, as to what you want out of your technology, what you're doing with your tech, how you feel about privacy, and how you feel about security, and how you feel about sharing your data in a world that seems to be taking more and more of your data from you, whether you want them to or not. So, Jeff, thank you so much for being here. I always appreciate it. And we have to get back on the horse and have you more often.
I am so up for that. And thank you for having me on. I always love getting to hang out with you, Chuck.
Well, make sure that you tell folks where else they can find you when you're not hanging out here, because, sometimes it's few and far between.
All right. Well, over at macobserver.com, I get to hang out with a bunch of incredibly talented people, which does include Kelly. And on Twitter, J Gamet, and Instagram, J Gamet. I'm kind of easy to find.
And of course, Daily Observations, Apple Context Machine,
the iOS show,
the
Big Show,
the Mac show. Yeah. So you're easy to find. No question.
I'm easy to find.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Miss Kelly, it's always a pleasure to have you. Your enthusiasm is infectious. Where can people go to get more?
You can find me on Twitter as Verso. You should find me on micro.blog as Verso. I am
micro.blog.
Yes!
I just started getting back into that again. I'm J Gamet there.
And it's so great, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can occasionally find me over at macobserver.com when I have a bunch to say that I need to write down. And I show up on Daily Observations with Jeff every so often. And you can find me on my own podcast, Greetings from the Uncanny Valley, where I talk about Westworld with my friend Don Melton. And you can occasionally find me other places as well. I just did an episode of The Menu Bar that was a lot of fun. And which is a show that's back for people who don't know. The Menu Bar has come back. It's pretty great. And every once in a while, you can find me on another show here and there on The Incomparable, which is where Greetings from the Uncanny Valley is hosted.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Oh, the rest of the time you can find me doing stuff for App Camp. I should probably point that out.
Oh, yes. Well, I think we figured that out. Yeah.
So, yeah, App Camp for Girls. appcamp4girls.com is the website. And you can find out more there about who we are and what we do if you have not heard me talk about it on a podcast somewhere else already.
We will see you again soon, Kelly.
Yay.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. Again, I hope this made you think. Some of the points made by Kelly and Jeff made me think. I've got to go back and reevaluate some of my prior conclusions. But at the end of the day, that's kind of the bottom line, is make us all think and not just click that button that I did this afternoon and share contacts with who knows who. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our MacVoices Facebook group, and get more out of your Apple Tech with MacVoices magazine, free on Flipboard. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us at patreon.com/MacVoices, and join these folks who help keep MacVoices coming to you. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.